communist.
It's hard to understand exactly what's happening. So we're going to look at this passage, but we'll look at it in a little different light. Let's pray. Gracious God, thank you today for your blessings and grace. Thank you for the good things that you've done for us and for the opportunity we have to be in your house. Thank you for these that are faithful to be here this morning. I pray, God, that you would bless them, encourage them today. And God, I pray that you'd help us as we open your word today to be faithful to it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So now we can talk about whether or not it was fair for the good man of the house to pay people a whole day's wages for their 1 hour of work. I do think it would be a good passage to apply to things like monetary policy, because what's happening, the person who writes the check is setting the rates. And when people agree to a certain thing, that's what they agreed to. If you agreed to work for so much an hour, it was good then. If you don't like it, go renegotiate. These people did not do that. They just saw that that these people that came in late, they were getting paid more, and they just assumed that they were getting paid a penny, and they just assumed that they were going to get more, that they were going to get paid more. And is that to help her take a nap during the preaching, or?
I've got a hitch in my
Oh, okay. Now, when you bring out the blanket, I'm going to be really concerned. Really concerned.
I have one of those in the car. They haul it in the recliner.
Yeah. So we can. There's a lot to be said about agreeing to work and doing a day's work. There's also a lot to be said about, hey, I've got this product in the field and it needs to get in, and so whatever it costs, then let's get it done. And so you could also make a point for escalating wages there too. There's a lot of things that you could make a point for if you wanted to. However, the point that we're going to look at in this is we're going to look at those first workers, the people that were there at the start of the day. So these guys were working a 12-hour day. They got there at 6 in the morning, and the evening was 6 in the evening. So these last people that came on then, they got hired at 5. So they got into the field like 1 hour, and then they were done. So working a long day, working 12-hour day, that's hard. That's a lot of work. And these guys have been out there working the whole time. They had some expectations about things. They had made some assumptions about things, and whenever their assumptions were wrong, then they got hit with something that's called disillusionment. Now, disillusionment is a really, really sneaky problem that we can have. It's not something that that will often hit you really hard and fast. Oftentimes, disillusionment creeps. And disillusionment, just to give a couple of definitions, is hurts caused by others that we impose on all people of a certain swath of people. We'll just take someone has hurt me in this way at this time, and then because of the sneakiness of disillusionment, over time, we'll begin to apply that hurt that this particular person put on us, and we'll apply that to all sorts of people this way. I recently witnessed an example of this. How can I say this and protect the innocent? There was a business interaction. We'll say it this way: a business interaction, and the business person on this side of the table, when they came in and saw the person on the other side of the table, they were instantly hit with a memory from the past of someone who had the same sort of appearance. Bald man, goatee, kind of hot rod looking attire. He's 55. He's trying to be 30, and he's kind of got that hot rod about him, and And so the person on this side of the table saw that, and it brought back memory, and no matter what the person on the other side of the table did or said, there was no getting past what someone and this person on this side of the table, there's no getting past what they had experienced in their past. They were disillusioned by people with that persona, regardless if it was fair to this person or not. So that was just not going to happen. And also, disillusionment is disappointment based upon the discovery that something or someone was not as good as one believed they were going to be. You ever become disillusioned at a restaurant? You go in, you order something, and it was just not what you wanted. And so now maybe the cook was having a bad day, but it wasn't as good as what you thought, and I'm just not going back there. And so or maybe take some time for you to go back. Now that's being on the light side of things, but here in Matthew 20, what we see is these people, these workers, they saw they're getting paid last, and they see these people who came in late in the day, they're getting paid a penny, and their thoughts are like, ooh, when we agreed for a penny, they only worked an hour. Maybe we're going to get 12 pennies. We're going to make more than they did, or because we've been here longer. So they're probably thinking, well, maybe we misunderstood. We thought it was a penny a day, but maybe it was a penny an hour. And they're like, oh, this is going to get really good. But then they get up there to get their pay, and it's just for the same penny that they agreed. Now, had the boss done anything wrong, he had not promised them penny an hour. He had not promised them anything. He had met the obligation that they were told at the beginning. Nothing changed from their original contract. They got what they wanted, but they had a feeling of unfair. So they had the original workers nurtured the illusion that they would be paid more. So there's a couple of key words in that, and that is this idea that feeds into disillusionment. Is an idea of nurturing. That means to try to feed into it, to build into it, an idea. Nurturing, and that is, so it's not something that's instantaneous. It's something that's kind of built, and then it's also an illusion. And so it's kind of like, it's Bugs Bunny, and he's on the desert, and there's a palace and palm trees and stuff up there, but it's just a mirage, right? So there's an illusion up there, and we believe that that's true. And so we work to that. We are really, really prone to some illusions in this day and age. Some of those mirages can be built and presented with Instagram filters and screenshots of my bank account and all this stuff that can be so manipulated and not even be the first thing to be true. And we saw CNN reporters taking fire in Baghdad. The only thing was, they were standing on top of the CNN tower in Atlanta. So we understand that true story, that really, really, really did happen. So, and now the guy, the reporter from that is like he's a big shot, big wig, like has a night show there. So there's a lot of this where we can fall in that, and then we think, okay, well then I'm not going to trust anything. Whenever we have this one area of distrust, then it breeds the further thing. Well, we thought it was this way. We thought that we could trust the FBI, but then we found out that like 8 of the 12 guys that were involved in this plot in Michigan were FBI guys, and they thought up the whole thing. Then you think, well, then I don't believe anything else that they do, even though the majority of the FBI guys are actually doing really, really, really good work, and they're catching bad guys left and right, and they're doing fantastic work. But we focus in on this one stupid thing that happened in Michigan, and we apply that across the path. And actually, when you look at that, the Michigan thing, the Washington, D.C. thing, you actually have one guy that's involved in all of this. You have one really, really bad apple across there, and he's painting the whole thing. He gets painted, the whole thing gets bad. Okay, so, what? 10 out of the 12. It was enormous. Yeah, right. Yeah, just like, finally, the guys are like, okay, if that's what you want to do, we got them. Anyway. So there's it's a really a difficult thing, this idea of disillusion. So let's think about this. Where does disillusionment start? Well, is it real? We talk about all these things about how do we become disillusioned. Individually or as groups, we can become disillusioned. R.B. Ouellette, who I'm using his book as a guide for this class, it's called What to Do When You Can't Just Get Over It. But in that book, he describes a situation and describes a person that I can relate to very, very well. Pastor Ouellette had hired a man to direct his music who had gotten his original music degree from a secular school. And then he got saved while he was at that secular school, and then went to a Christian school and got a Christian music degree. So he was really invested in his education and was really invested in trying to do things right in a godly way. Very, very invested financially, emotionally, the whole bit. He gets from the secular school to the Christian college and then realizes there that not everyone in the Christian college lives up to the standard that he thought it would be. He thought he was going to a Christian college. Everyone on campus would be a Christian, and everyone would have the same zeal for God that he had, and everyone would have the same attitude, and that wasn't true. And then he gets hired onto a church staff, and he thought everyone on church staff would have the same zeal of God, and everyone would do the same way. And so Pastor Ouellette describes a story where this man was having some work done at his house, and Pastor Ouellette's over there. He's down on his knees. They've got tools. They're working on his floor, and the man says, "Well, are you going to disappoint me too?" And Pastor Ouellette said, "Yes, I will. Yes, I will." Because there's no one perfect. That doesn't exist. There's not a perfect pastor. There's not a perfect church. There's not a perfect school. There's not a perfect family. It just doesn't exist. But sometimes we can come out of a place like, I think that people are really susceptible to this who've come out of the world, and maybe they are adult when they get saved, and then they hear about Jesus, and for the first time really this whole idea about what it could be to live a Christian life, that is a near utopian concept to them. And so then they come hard toward Christianity, believing that they're going to find this immaculate landscape, and it's not. And we are seeing this now. This is another big danger that we're seeing with people, like, I'll say it this way, like of our stripe. Conservative, Bible-believing, good churches, good families. But we, a lot of times, will send our young people to Bible college. And at Bible college, they kind of forgot where they came from. They forgot the church they left had 35 people in it, okay? And they go to Bible college where there's 3,500 people. And then their teachers and their preachers are saying, if you follow God's plan, then you're going to have, hundreds and then thousands of people. It'll go this way, and in this sort of time, and somehow probably not told them. I don't believe that their teachers, their preachers tell them this, but somehow or another they get the concept that your church back there with 30 people was doing it wrong. If you will do it right, you'll have a church like this. And then they get out there, and it's not like that. It's not like that at all. They have to go get a job. It's not like that at all. Or they get to Bible college, and someone said, trust God for your finances at Bible college. And they get to Bible college, and lo and behold, the bill comes due next month. And how are they going to pay for it? A lot of those Bible colleges, like one Allen and Haley attend, well, there's no debt. You can't carry last semester's debt to this semester. You don't take your finals until the whole semester is paid for. Yeah.
You have an echo in the back.
Yeah. So then they're like, well, where was God? God let me down. So then you start saying, well, is this real? Well, and they'll start to say, well, then that preacher lied to me. That teacher lied to me. And they begin to not believe in that. Pastor Ouellette gave another example. Those ones about Bible colleges, that's Bo putting in there. But Pastor Ouellette gave another example of that there was a lady had been really, really faithful to church, and then all of a sudden she wasn't there. And so after a couple weeks, they go to see her, what's going on. And she says, well, I believed that God was going to let me win the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes. And then not only did I not win the sweepstakes, but my cat died. God let me down. And she really, really believed that because she had prayed and asked God to let her win the sweepstakes, and she kept getting these notices, congratulations, you've made it on to the next round, then she thought, like, everybody makes it on to the next round. But she thought that she was special and that she was moving on to this thing. And it's designed, think about that. There's an illusion, there's a design to keep you in it, because the longer you're in it, the more life insurance and magazines and diet plans and whatever kind of garbage they can sell you along the way as you are becoming special to get the big check, and Ed McMahon is showing up in the convertible and giving you the gigantic check. Well, is Ed McMahon still alive?
He is, but he's driving around convertible and somebody else is
Oh. It's too bad. I was hoping that he would show up at my place, but God let me down, But there's, that's how I know about that process. I'm feeling special. I did that one time. I filled it out, all the thing. It's like, oh man, this is stupid. After a while, because they just kept selling you more and more. And then of all things, then her cat died, so God was really being unfair. So then so people will think, well, is it real? Some people have had experience where their pastor fell, or their teacher fell, or maybe their father fell. Just kind of pick on the guys here today. Pastor Ouellette again gave another example of, here's a girl that's sitting in his office for counseling. Parents have brought her in. She's in an inappropriate relationship with this guy who no one in the group believes is a godly kid. And so the girl is answering respectfully, and but she's not budging. She's just not budging at all. And, well, after a bit, through some different questioning, you think, come to find out, another leader, different church, but another one of her leaders had, like a youth pastor, had hurt her, had abused her. And in that moment, Pastor Ouellette has this kind of epiphany, and he says, so you wonder if you could trust me because maybe I've done that to someone else and I'm hiding that, and you wonder if you could trust your dad because maybe he's hurt someone else and he's hiding that. And lo and behold, this is really what was going on. She had become disillusioned about men in any kind of level of authority or power, and she had come to believe that because this person who was in a power and authority, and specifically a Christian place of power and authority, that since he had done that and was hiding that and he was secretly this kind of a nasty person, then maybe everyone in that category was that sort of person. She did not have trust of that. So why should she invest her respect? Why should she invest her emotion, her life in the direction that they want him to go? Why not just go off with this scummy guy? At least she could tell what he was. Makes sense. It actually makes sense when you think about it. And so the hurt that she experienced was real. We're not going to try to excuse that. But it's not okay to stay in the hurt. This is also some of the thing. It's not her fault that she had that. But now then, it did happen to her. How do we move to the next step? Let's talk about the road to disillusionment. When I was driving, my dad said this when I was learning to drive, that the car follows your eyes. And then I watched that Tom Cruise movie about racetrack driving. And that's, what was it called? It's Mellow Yellow. Days of Thunder. And and somewhere in there, it was like, well, don't look at the wall, because if you look at the wall, you're going to get in it. Or if you're thinking about crashing, you're going to crash. This is me playing golf. If I'm thinking about, don't hit it into the houses over there on number 8, I will hit it into the houses over there. I mean, that's, if you're thinking about don't do it, you will do it. If something about like your setup, everything about it will put you into the wrong place. And so you see this happen a lot. You meet people on the highway this way. They are looking at you. You see them up the road. They're driving fine down the middle of the lane. But for some reason, they start looking at you. And they're driving further and further into you. And you're like, what are you doing, you moron? And they're coming right. They're worried about you. And so they are driving at you. And so that's something that, I mean, it's just, huh? Yeah, they're on a like kamikaze mission or something. So this is where your car will follow your eyes. So then let's think about this whenever we're looking at Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 19. Proverbs 6:19. Actually, let's look at 16. Knew I would do that. Sorry. Sorry. It is kind of funny though. You should always wait until I start reading. I know. All right. These 6 things doth the Lord hate. Yea, 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look. And I just love it that number 1, Proverbs 6:16. 6:16. These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are abomination to him. And then he starts this list with, it's not the things that generally, it's not what starts our list. When we start hauling off and we're laming off these wicked sins and people, nobody's out there, them weirdos from Oklahoma who would go out there with when people were, when a soldier would die and they would go out there protesting, they're not out there. Westboro, they're not out there chanting about pride. Not like this kind of pride, but a proud look. God hates it. And proud look will almost always top God's list. A lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, and heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among the brethren. We'll focus on that last one here and say that the first stop on the road to disillusionment is a transformed pattern of conversation. We're not going to turn there, but I'm going to remind you because we've been there recently, and that's to talk about Absalom. So recall that Absalom was disillusioned with his father because he had not dealt with Amnon properly. When Amnon assaulted Tamar, then Absalom was disillusioned with his father. And it's interesting that happens with disillusionment is that our conversation changes. So next thing that Absalom does is he's out there looking and listening to other people who also feel like that they've been hurt. And they start moving the conversation needle in that direction. This was bad for me. Wasn't it also bad for you? Didn't you feel this way? And asking leading questions and bringing people onto their side to confirm their disillusionment. And it's almost always this way. I can think about it in areas where I've become disillusioned. Yeah, I want to confirm my disillusion with other people, and I will feel better about it if they also have the same opinion. Now, I think, okay, it's one thing for me to say that, but I would propose to you that practically every national politician uses disillusionment to try to win elections. Because you are trying to get people, they're trying to push people into this idea to say, see, haven't you been afflicted? Haven't you been hurt? Haven't you had these experiences? And we're the same, and we can't trust them. We can't, all of that you've seen that's been a lie, that you've been let down by the other side. And they use disillusionment to try to bring people to their side. Absalom did this. He had a successful revolt, a successful rebellion. He takes possibly the most popular king ever in Israel. And whenever we read our Bible, everybody talks about King David. He unseats his own father and the most popular king. Unseats him. Becomes the king of Israel. David's living in a tent in the woods. Because he brought people in with his conversation. He's out there listening to them, talking to them. He's sowing discord with them. And then disillusionment, second stop, is a distorted view of others. A distorted view about other people. Brother Ouellette brings out an example, and one that I am familiar with in my office at home. I have several pictures and some great, who I consider great men of God, J. Frank Norris and others. And because back in the 1950s, there was a major movement among Baptists who had been part of the Southern Baptist Convention. Let me just pick for a minute. Let me stop for a second and say, not all Baptists were part of the Southern Baptist Convention. Southern Baptist Convention was started out of Baptists who were not part of the Southern Baptist Convention. So that's just part of a thing. Not all Southern Baptists are bad. I'm going to say that as well. Okay, neither were they, and that's what this example is going to say. But in the 50s, what had happened was there had been a rush of modernism into some of the leadership in the SBC. And so with that rush of modernism, then a lot of people like J. Frank Norris and others were coming out of the SBC, and it was sometimes violent. But people had gotten really, and the SBC has oscillated from conservative to modern. You just see all these different things, and there's an oscillation that happens there. And you're seeing this now, like what's happening with Rick Warren and Saddleback and all that. A lot of times you wouldn't even know that Saddleback's probably like one of the largest churches in the SBC. They just don't, it's not Saddleback Baptist Church. That's what confuses people, but it is the Southern Baptist Church, Southern Baptist Convention Church. So you see these sort of fights, and that's why we like being independent. Do whatever you're going to do, okay? We got our own problems. Leave us alone, okay? But so there's, anyway, so there was a man that came out of there who was one of the comer-outers in the 1950s, and, well, he had some friends that stayed. They stayed in the SBC. And so he went to talk to also one of the great come-outers of all times was John Rice, Dr. John Rice, Sword of the Lord. And he's like, and the preacher, he says, I just can't believe he stayed in. It's just wrong. And Brother Rice says to him, well, is what they teach wicked? And this preacher says, yes, it's wicked. Are those associations in there, are they wicked? He says, that's wicked. Are those men wicked that they're participating in that? He says, yes, that's wicked. Where were you 1 year ago? The guy is speechless because actually 6 months ago he was still part of the SBC. And so what changed? And that was the point. So sometimes when we become disillusioned, then we have a wrong view about other people. Just because some of those men didn't come out didn't make them wicked. Didn't make, some people had wrong ideas. We can't judge everyone by some wrong ideas. And so, because there's certainly some independents that we're not going to agree with, right? There's all kinds of things, okay, that to go on about. And we oftentimes get a distorted view of other people. We could take on the view that everyone is hiding something. And the truth is, thank God everybody's hiding something. I'm glad you wore pants. So everybody is hiding something. We don't want all that. We need to be open. Hebrews chapter 4, all things are naked and exposed to him with whom in the eyes of him with whom we have to do. So I want Christ to know everything about me. I don't want you to know everything about me. But I guess the problem comes, we could be on the wrong side of that if we pretend that we don't have sin, that we don't have fault, okay, and set ourselves up that way. But here's where most often the issue comes, is with people who have assumed that everything is right and perfect. And then they go to find, it's not that leader was saying, I'm right and perfect, it's just that they had taken on this assumption. They had been like the workers early in the day who thought, well, surely I'm getting more. No one ever said they were getting more. It was their assumption. It was their illusion, and they had nurtured this illusion that they were perfect. This is the error. So we have a distorted view about other people. We have a distorted view. This happens so often in politics. It happens so often at work, where we think they're out to get us, or they're... Why do you think that? Well, it's just because of this distorted view. We think this person's all bad or they're all good. I'll admit to my own disillusionment towards compliance officers. I think they're all horrible people. I think they all got swirlies in school. I think that they're out to, the guys all put on lipstick and load their guns at night with the crossing off the list of people they're trying to kill. I just think they're all wackos. So but there's we all have a distorted view. Maybe there's probably two of them that are good people, but it's not all. Yeah, not all.
And they're in Arkansas.
Yeah, they're not here. So yeah, we just feel like everybody's hiding something, and so we can fall into that view. And then the third stop along the road to disillusionment, and this one's really, we could look at Galatians chapter 6 for this one. We'll start at verse 1. Galatians 6, 1. You could read all the way down through 10, but if you just pick on verse 1. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness. Look at this last passage. Considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. The last stop on the road to disillusionment is that oftentimes we can fall into the same trap of the people who disillusioned us. In all fairness, this book from Brother Ouellette, it's really written from a pastoral view, and oftentimes it seems like the intended target are other other preachers, other pastors. Everybody could get help from it, I'm sure. But you could take that pastor who's disillusioned because some big preacher fell, and they can obsess about that and think, how could he do that? How could he do that? How could he do that? Well, the issue is that we all have to recognize that we all have the opportunity. Any one of us could fall. It's not that any one of us will fall, but any one of us could fall. I could fall. This ought to help us to recognize that everyone has that opportunity, and it also ought to help us a little out of that disillusionment. Only thing is, we could then come into the place where then we just become disillusioned with all of life. You have to be careful of that. Yes?
I noticed since becoming a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
the people that have hurt me the worst in my life have been a Christian.
Yes. Yes. Now, sometimes, and I'll just briefly, I would say that sometimes people do hurt, and we could say on purpose. They know that what they're doing is harmful. And sometimes people hurt, and they don't even know that they've done it. That doesn't change the fact that the hurt occurred. But once that hurt has occurred, it's not that we shouldn't try to get forgiveness and work toward reconciliation if possible. But regardless if that ever happens, then we still have to deal with our own hurt, our own disillusionment, our own dissatisfaction, whatever is the case, however that has impacted us. And I'd say that that's very definitely true, because we have this expectation that Christians should behave differently. And but we really do fall. So then, how do we take this apart? Just very quickly, picking up the pieces. First of all, Jeremy, could you get Isaiah 26 and verse 3? And then Joe, could you get Psalm 62:5? And that is just that we need to look to Jesus. If we're picking up the pieces of disillusionment, and, well, very often we get disillusioned. All of this, if you might notice, all of this discussion has been by looking out at other people, how we perceive that they're being treated, how we perceive that they're acting, how we perceive that that's going on. So it's all from this inside view looking out, and that causes disillusionment on our inside. But it colors how we see everything on the outside. So how do we fix it whenever we're starting to become disillusioned? Well, it seems really simple, but one is to look to Jesus. So Jeremy, what do you see there, Isaiah 26:3? Yeah. Perfect peace whose mind is stayed on him. Peace, okay? That is the way forward, is our eyes upon him, not on everyone else. So we that put our eyes there, and then what is Psalm 62:5? That wait only upon God. There's not, if we are looking to someone else to try to be our solution, we're in trouble. I heard yesterday a brief part of an interview from a guy who had been an Obama voter, and he later became a Bernie supporter, and then he later fell out of politics. Here's the reason why, is that whenever he voted for Obama because he felt like Obama was going to bring hope and change. Only thing, when Obama became president, then we got into more wars, we dropped more bombs, we spent more money, and what he was hoping for was that we wouldn't do all that. So he becomes disillusioned with that. It's like a failed promise. And then he becomes a Bernie supporter, and then he's like, we're raising all this money for Bernie. We don't want Hillary to be the president. We're raising all this money for Bernie, and somebody comes to him and says, this is what's going to happen. Bernie's going to raise all of your money. He's going to drop out, take all of that money you gave to him, and give it to Hillary. And that's what happened. And he's like, I'm out. I'm out. And what happened is that his mind was like, okay, well, the fix for my problem, the fix for this country rests in these individuals. And so many people think that. They think it's in Donald Trump. They think it's in Gavin Newsom. I don't think anybody really thinks it's in Joe Biden. He's just a placeholder for something else. But there's all this idea of like, okay, then there's our hope and security. No, it's not. Or if we have a bigger, faster airplane, or a bigger, faster bomb, or if we have a bigger dollar, or we have a bigger business, or we have a bigger plan, that's not the solution to what's going to fix you. So many of us are looking outside for these solutions. They won't fix you, but God can fix you. This is the whole point. And this is where social justice, I know I'm out of time, but this is where social justice steps off the rails. Is they want to say, it's Ibrahim or any of these others that are trying to do that, and they want to almost put a Christian veneer over the social justice thing. What happens is they take the focus off of God fixing the individual, and they put it over on God fixing this community and this group salvation. And it's not just them. It could be in a Mike Pence style of nationalism too. It can be in any of these other things that says, well, the fix is in, we'll get salvation through this group. No, God will fix the individual. Individualism, this is something where we need to get back to, and that's, well, we're not. Jesus is coming soon, that'll fix it. Okay, so then, so that's picking up the pieces. Part number 1, look to Jesus. Part 2, realistic view of others. Have a realistic view of other people. Everyone is hiding something. But understand that God uses imperfect people. God uses imperfect people. People that do things that you wouldn't do. They say things that you wouldn't say. They wear things that you wouldn't wear. But God uses them. Imperfect people. I just finished last week. If you have not read this or listened to the audiobook, God's Smuggler. How did I make it this far in my life? This book that's been out forever. I just got through it. How did I get this far in my life and I never read that book? It's an amazing book. The couple that came back and they were sitting here. Here comes the Olsons. But they looky here.
Perfect timing.
That young couple that came there, and he's like, you got to read this. So I downloaded it, and I just couldn't stop listening to it. Well, he was imperfect. Nobody wanted him. He fell out of this school, that school. Nobody would accept him to this school, that school. He's like, I'm just going to do it anyway. And so he did it anyway, and he did it huge. God uses imperfect people. And he had all kinds of problems. He wasn't, there was different things. Besides his physical problems, he had other things that were kind of weird and wonky with him, but God used him. God uses weird and wonky and failed people. And so if we have a realistic view about others, that will help us out of our disillusionment. And then, lastly, we need to have a meek self-view. You don't need to be perfect, and you can fall. So this, Galatians chapter 6, this verse 1, in meekness. Meekness, I preached a message about this last week, but meekness is not being out of control. It's not being hobbled, but it's being under control of the master. It's being under God's control. And so we remain strong, we remain powerful, but we put ourselves under God's control. So then we don't have to be perfect, but we trust God to take up our error, our failure. So that will be some things to help with disillusionment in our life. Any questions or comment this morning? Yes, Brother Jim.
How do you know I went to the last?
Amen. I do too. I do it too.
Yes.
2009.
2009.
That tells me how.
Yeah. He's not coming to your door ever.
Oh man.